Good morning, Kirk. That's right. We did see early momentum around this framework, but things hit a bit of a snag by the middle of the week. The president's executive order comes on the 2-year anniversary of George Floyd's death. In light of those new disturbing images coming from Ukraine, Secretary Blinken is calling for a war crimes investigation and also further sanctions. Today, we'll hear from two former advisors to the former Vice President, Mike Pence, who will likely give us some more insight about what was going on. Now, Democrats are entertaining one last option that's potentially including a path to citizenship inside of their $3.5 trillion spending plan. People here tell me immigrants played an essential role on the front lines of the pandemic. Although last time around when they voted on a bipartisan commission to investigate the deadly attack, 35 Republicans joined that effort. Only 2 supported yesterday's vote. Good evening. It definitely was. And we know this wasn't the first hearing looking into this topic, but it definitely was one of the most emotional. What is the White House's response to these new accusations, and are you at all concerned that it might taint public view as we go into hearings next week?
Taking Judge Jackson's record widely out of context.
Senator Warnock on the Senate side talked about voting rights yesterday, staying here through the holidays to get it done, and really pressuring the White House and Senator Manchin to push for maybe a similar carve-out as we saw for the debt ceiling. Do you share that sentiment?
Completely am inspired by and agree with what he said.
What is going to be the message from the president given this crisis?
We have to stand for democracy.
Dreamers aren't in the clear just yet. Here on Capitol Hill, some lawmakers say they're unsure Meta can be trusted. Police have increased security and say they're working closely with local law enforcement as well as the Supreme Court police.
I think that there is a path forward in Congress to get the funding needed in order to see this plan through. You're feeling better? I know you had affected recently.
I've recovered and I'm antigen negative.
What's interesting about this situation in particular is this used to be a bipartisan effort, voting rights. I guess, what is your interpretation of what's at play in this moment? Why have we seen such a dramatic switch? Now, it's important to note that the president did file lawsuits in each of those states, and 2 of them have already been dismissed. A CNN poll that was conducted just after the insurrection showed that 3 out of 4 Republicans believe that this election was illegitimate. So that is a tough crowd to try and convince otherwise. And we saw President Biden actually speak directly to those individuals in his inauguration address.
The president is prepared to make tough decisions if it means the safe return of Americans.
The State Department says President Joe Biden has signed off on a prisoner swap with Russia to bring WNBA star Brittany Griner home.
My hope would be that in speaking to Foreign Minister Lavrov, I can advance the efforts.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken says he plans to speak with Russia's top diplomat to discuss the potential deal in coming days. Griner is currently on trial in Moscow, where she's been detained since February on drug charges. She faces up to 10 years in prison for carrying vape cartridges containing cannabis oil through the airport. The offer also demands the release of Paul Whelan. Whelan has been detained in Russia since 2018 and is now serving a 16-year sentence on espionage charges.
We believe that this is a serious proposal, and we want the Russians to take it seriously as well.
The White House is keeping a tight lip on the details.
For success here, we're obviously not going to be able to share more publicly about the deal.
But is likely offering up convicted Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout in the trade. Russia for years has called for his release. In 2012, Bout was sentenced to 25 years in U.S. prison.
Get ready.
Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are preparing to crack down on big tech.
That it's going to affect literally every American.
Illinois Democratic Senator Dick Durbin says the Senate is advancing legislation to prevent big tech companies like Google, Amazon, or Apple from promoting their content over smaller competitors.
Consumers should have a choice.
Competition is a good thing. If not an even playing field, at least have a chance.
Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley is one of 5 Republicans on the committee who voted to push the bill forward.
Congress should have acted years ago.
And he says he'd like to see even more aggressive legislation.
I ultimately think that these monopoly-sized companies ought to be broken up.
The bipartisan bill is just one of several proposals gaining steam on Capitol Hill designed to clamp down on big tech's power. Carl Szabo with NetChoice, which represents companies like Google and Amazon, calls the effort a distraction cooked up by Democrats.
To shift the focus of Americans away from the troubles in the economy to pinning all the blame on business.
Szabo says the federal government already has the needed power
to go after any business that has market power, abuses that market power, and leads to consumer harm.
So far, the Biden administration has not endorsed any specific bills, but is taking steps of its own. This week, the Federal Trade Commission announced plans for new guidelines to stop large companies, especially in the tech industry, from merging into potential monopolies. In Washington, Raquel Martin. The bloody battle for Ukraine is intensifying as Russian forces are ramping up attacks across the country. Since the start of the war, the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has recorded more than 4,000 civilians have been injured and nearly 2,000 killed. Friday, Ukraine's president said Russian forces are terrorizing Ukrainians. Right now, Zelensky is pleading for more aggressive sanctions against Russian oil to try and deter escalating attacks. He's also warning Putin may ultimately turn to nuclear warfare if the battle drags out, especially after Ukraine successfully sank Russia's Black Sea flagship Thursday.
None of us can take lightly the threat posed.
Thursday, CIA Director William Burns echoed concerns that after setbacks on the ground, Putin could pivot to Russian nuclear weapons.
Given the potential desperation of President Putin and the Russian leadership.
But adds the only current evidence is Putin's verbal threats.
So far, we haven't seen a lot of practical evidence of the kind of deployments.
In response to Zelensky's pleas, this week the Biden administration okayed another $800 million in aid to help Ukraine's military fight back. The package includes an additional 11 Mi-17 helicopters, 500 Javelin missiles, 300 Switchblade drones, and 100 armored Humvees. In Washington, Raquel Martin.
I will be haunted forever.
Highland Park Mayor Nancy Rodering says she's unsure how her community will recover after a gunman opened fire at their annual 4th of July parade.
We were screaming, "Run, shoot her."
She was there when a 21-year-old killed 7 people and injured dozens more.
Less than a minute is all it took for a person with an assault weapon to shoot 83 rounds into a crowd, forever changing so many lives.
Wednesday, Rodering called on senators to ban assault-style weapons to stop future shootings.
I'm angry.
Illinois Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth, an Iraq War veteran, says assault weapons belong on the battlefield, not America's streets.
We can still hunt. We can still have an armed citizenry. We can do all of that without weapons of war.
But Republicans argue a ban won't stop the killings and will only stop law-abiding citizens from protecting themselves.
Against the horrible spike in violent crime.
Republicans like Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley say Democrats ought to focus their attention on improving mental health.
We can't keep seeing shooter after shooter follow the same predictable path and nobody does anything about it.
Congress recently passed gun safety legislation, putting millions towards that effort.
This isn't where we stop.
America must do better.
Illinois Democratic Senator Dick Durbin says despite Republican pushback, he's pushing for a ban.
And I voted for the first assault weapons ban. I'll do it again.
In Washington, Raquel Martin.